I did prime time back in the day.
Did you?
Oh yeah, I was
You
dressed up as Megan.
Day, so you did.
Dressed up as Megan. Oh wait.
Oh, you did. Yeah, you did.
Oh man.
I had a sweet wig and everything.
Wait, you telling me that wasn't the original look?
Here's where the real question comes in. Do you still have the wig?
I'm not even sure whose wig that was.
Oh, fair enough.
I think I should have demanded that we hear a voice for this.
It's really, really Rebecca.
No, God.
And the video has to be uploaded with a face reveal too.
Oh man, that's what you should have got. You should have got Rebecca to read the questions out of that.
She can say swears into the mic just constantly. That's the only audio we get.
Just abuse.
Stop fucking making me do this.
Why is this the Bully Shy podcast?
This is literally the only time you are not the one bullying all of us.
I'd like to point out that you invited us, Shy. Starting to realize my mistake. That's fair.
I'm DK Diamantes. I do stuff on Twitch and YouTube under that same name, DK Diamantes. I do some Warframe stuff. I do some variety stuff. I'm a giant weeb, so there's a good chance there's anime and stuff on my channels.
Okay, my name's Tactical Potato. I do stuff on YouTube and Twitch just like DK. I'm also not a weeb.
And I'm Brozime. I do things on Twitch and YouTube and am sort of a weeb sometimes, occasionally. Now that we have all of the unimportant people out of the way, Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Scott McGregor. I'm the design lead on Warframe, and I'm here to be your punching bag.
Oh, I don't know about that.
If you insist.
Shy, if you have any introductory things. Obviously, it's your channel, so probably not necessary, but if you want to go crazy. Yeah, hello, Scum.
Hello, Scum.
That's fair. I guess where we should probably begin, I think, is that obviously Warframe has a very long history and there's a lot of balancing and stuff to do. And I think it's fairly safe to say that you are in charge of most of that stuff, Scott.
I wouldn't say I'm the sole person in charge of that. I would say there's a bunch of us that kind of work at it. It's gotten so large that it doesn't fit in any kind of one person's brain anymore. Some of the harder decisions are left to a few of us, but generally we take input from quite a few people on the team from all aspects, from community, QA to programming, UI. A bunch of us have input into these changes.
Yeah, and then obviously we know that some members of the team, namely, of course, Pablo, have gone out there and said that they're kind of in charge of certain Warframes and things of that nature, right?
I've done the vast majority of the Warframes as kind of the sole person who does the balancing, I guess, and the final tweaks.
Right.
Pablo has done quite a few now. Jordan Bale, who jumped on, he's the main programmer on the Warframes and the Warframe powers. He jumped on and designed one himself. Rebecca's done one. There's been multiple people that have kind of taken the reins and kind of taken over doing Warframes because they are so kind of siloed. They kind of exist on their own and be worked on by themselves without involving a ton of people. So,
right. So, do you think that approach has led to a large design difference between a lot of Warframes in terms of what the goals are when creating a Warframe, or do you think it's been pretty cohesive in the end?
I think generally it's been pretty cohesive. Again, the majority of them kind of are generally the people we lean on when we are doing balance changes in the game, like Pablo and Rebecca, Steve, Glenn.
People that know the game very well and have been around a long time.
Yeah, these are the people that we generally lean on when we're making balance changes in the game, especially, Warframes and stuff like that. So when those things happen, generally those people get input.
Fairly large group of you guys. Are there any kind of large disagreements that are maybe a long-standing kind of tussle between everyone on what the philosophies of how things should be handled are? Is there tension there, or is it generally pretty smooth between everybody?
I would say it's probably 75% smooth with 25% warring spouses with slamming doors.
Okay, fair enough.
It depends on what the thing is and who's in the mood to fight and where the source of the initial problem or feedback is coming from. Yeah, it really kind of depends. Some of the smaller things, that you would think are easy changes that should just be done end up in kind of the biggest fights sometimes for whatever reason. But generally, I would say it's for the most part, it's pretty smooth, and we try to all stay on the same page. As you guys know, there's been things that we haven't addressed for a long time, which we tried to do with the revised stuff. And a lot of those things were like, those are the hard things to fix that generally cause bigger arguments. But
yeah, like whenever you're going through and changing how armor works across the entirety of the game, obviously there's going to be some fights.
There is some fights. Yep.
When it comes to choosing the currency table of items you'd buy off the vendor, how steep those are or how low they are, is there ever any kind of, would that be a topic where you, I guess, would kind of have slight disagreements with or agreements with whether it's going to be too steep, too cheap, to a balance in between for those as well?
Yep.
It would.
Like, how much is the, like, what's the idea on whenever you guys are trying to release an event? Like, what is the kind of player investment time you guys are usually looking for, I guess I would say?
I think we kind of pick a rough number of hours we figure the players should engage in the content with to figure out what they should get as what we feel is the base rewards,
right?
Or the participation awards, we call them. How long those things take to get, and then we kind of work backwards from that and kind of figure out the scoring of the event, and then how the currency is doled out based on the scoring.
Right.
Events, man, they're tough sometimes. The scoring always seems to end up almost the most complicated thing about them. Unfortunately, I don't know why this has worked out this way, but it always seems to work out this way, that we start out with a simple intention of this is the cool event we're going to do, and then the scoring to figure out how do people achieve their rewards kind of ends up being the most complicated thing. Probably something we need to address for future events. Like, it shouldn't require a spreadsheet and a math degree to figure out how you get your rewards and how we dole out the rewards.
Specifically in the case with Scarlet Spear, the overcomplication led to a lot of bugs and people not getting their rewards, and obviously you guys would like to avoid as much of that as possible in the future.
I don't know if the scoring was the source of the problem. The scoring was it
added on top of it.
The canary in the coal mine, I think, is the thing that kind of told us that things were kind of broken under the hood. Scarlet Spear relied on a lot of tech that really hadn't been exercised in that way. You know, we extended the hub code to allow, inner talk between different squads. That's what Operation Link is. And in doing that, testing it all kind of locally and with the small amount of test cluster people we have, it all seemed to be working okay. But then once you start to get
a large scale of
with
many thousands of players
and a lot of clans across several time zones and across several geo locations, things fell apart. And it was very difficult to track those things down, and took most of our senior engineers multiple tries to figure out what the heck was happening and why it was happening. The scoring for Scarlet Spear was just the kind of the end result showing that there was a bug and a problem. The idea behind the scoring was to, we wanted people to feel like as a group they were achieving a goal. The fact that they had to complete the flotilla together. You ran all 100 Murexes and they're all gone, then you all get a bonus together. You're all accumulating a little bit of currency along the way, and the big payouts are at the end when you've achieved the goal as a group. That was kind of the hope and the dream. Maybe for future events, that's not a good thing to do, but with a lot of things in Warframe, we try some things and they don't work, and either we don't do those things again or we change the way we're doing them and adapt.
In your smaller test clusters, everything worked great, but then when it moved to sort of that worldwide scale, everything just sort of didn't quite work out. I'm obviously not a game developer. Is there a better way to test it on a large scale 100%. So that doesn't happen again? Like, is there like a public test cluster that can better show how it's going to interact once it gets to a large group of people?
Yeah, the test cluster is in the works to expand to a larger set of people.
Okay.
I think in general, The test cluster has been great over the years, but I think it's time to make it bigger, and it's time to make it involve people in different locations of the world and allow us to test things at scale and, increase our testing bandwidth. The game is so huge now that, our internal QA has a hard time getting complete coverage all the time. The public PC test cluster should give us better coverage when we're coming up to major releases. I think the biggest thing that people are fearing right now is spoilers coming from the test cluster. There's been a lot of internal discussion about how to do this, off and on. Do we turn the test cluster off and on? Do we allow access off and on? Do we have watermarks on how it's done? How's the watermark done? How do other companies address this? Is it a watermark that moves around the screen so they can't be blacked out?
Yeah.
Or is it so big that it's intrusive in the game and they don't get kind of the right experience from it? But there's definitely a movement internally to scale up the test cluster and try to get better coverage of these kind of big releases and big events, and kind of work through them more technically before we release them to the public and have that better first impression.
Just to go back to Scarlet Spear just for a second, just in terms of like the balance of that event, I think it's like personally pretty plain to see that there's maybe a very large difference between like the ground mission and how active that mission is versus the space mission and how active that is. And it has led to quite a lot of discussion internally, I'm sure, because we've seen some changes that are going to be coming into effect. With, of course, already we had Korra like not being able to heal the oplinks anymore, and then the nerf to Limbo for sentience in general. Whenever you guys release a piece of content, or there's a piece of content in the game that players play a whole lot, how much is it considered that like that content is just being like, it is the home for a Warframe that has been created in the past and is not necessarily like breaking the content? It's just where that Warframe belongs, like say with Saren and ESO.
Basically, when Limbo basically made Scarlet Spear kind of cheesy or too easy, that kind of thing.
Like he trivialized it. Like, let's
so do you just look at it and go after it's released and go, okay, we need to change Limbo because of this update and because of this event, not because Limbo was shining before the event, but because he's shining during the event.
That's tough, because you basically said, oh, this is his home, but he completely trivializes the content.
Right. Which is obviously a problem, but like, how do you balance between?
If everyone can accept that that's a problem.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree that's an issue.
Yeah. So maybe the way we reacted to the problem was incorrect and probably too quick. But I would say that if something completely trivializes the thing that we're working on, generally, I think ideally we would have changed the event, but at the time I think it was easier to change the Warframe.
Yeah. So do you?
Not a great answer, and it's probably not a great strategy going forward. But that's what we did. Would I take it back now? Probably. And we still might, right?
Right, yeah, of course. I mean, there's always like, you guys have reverted many changes in the past. It's not unheard of. It's not crazy to think that you guys would change something back. Like, you guys are literally changing Korra back right now. Like, that's already happening.
Yeah. Again, Scarlet Spear is a part of the bigger new war experience as the year progresses. So the sentients are going to become a bigger part of the game in general.
Right.
So making sure they fit in and work with the game is a good thing. So figuring out if there's things that they can do that other content can't do, I don't think it's generally a bad thing.
Right.
The fact that we were all transitioning to work from home and adjusting to our new reality, I guess, didn't help the situation. I don't think it's generally an excuse for it, though. The two event missions are kind of built on two different content, right? So the rail or the ground mission is built on a foundation of 7 years of development. Making a ground mission and a core Warframe game mode is a well-trodden, well-known path. The code is very solid. the implementation ideas and the code to do certain things is all there and can be moved around and copied and pasted very easily. So that mission we were able to iterate on a lot quicker.
Right.
Versus
with the scaling changes and stuff you
Railjack,
guys did.
or the Railjack mission is built on top of Railjack, which is much newer and much more fragile in code and design and implementation. It doesn't have a lot of the stuff that the ground mission stuff has. So just getting the mission kind of up and running took longer than I guess we expected, and gave us less time to iterate on the actual design of the game mode.
Right.
So I think that's why there's the quality difference. If I had to put it into words, one of the big mistakes that we seem to keep repeating, not intentionally, but kind of by happenstance, I guess, is the requirement to kill to advance the game mode. The ground mission requires you to kill in order to advance.
Right.
So you're forced to engage with the enemies and forced to kill them. The mission does not require this.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And that's
utilize it with CC and with Limbo, just avoiding combat altogether.
right. So in the future, would you guys say that generally you're going to want to include like a combat aspect in most of the designs?
100%. We should have, and it should have been noticed earlier. But again, some of the things that happened at the time is how it worked out. Again, built on more fragile tech. Uplink was very fragile. And then the fact that we were all picking up a computer and trying to deal with, family life and getting back to semblance of normalcy, all happening at the same time.
Yeah, just a huge stack of complications, basically.
Yeah, I don't use it as an excuse because I don't think it is a great excuse, but I think that's kind of where we ended up.
Obviously, I think as the new war progresses, do you think that we're going to get further differentiating game modes from Railjack? Or do you think we're going to get more of kind of what this event has been, where it's a lot of ground stuff? Like it's in Railjack and you're using the Railjack to move the satellite between the missions. But for the most part, I find that those missions are pretty much an on-foot mission, utilizing like the cool new tile set of the sentient ships. And with the Railjack being more of a transportation device than a combat device. Does that have anything to do with what I would see personally as the community in general mostly not really enjoying the current balance of the Railjack combat itself?
I don't think we made any hard decisions about that sort of balance of gameplay, like where we're more leaning. I'm personally working on right now, I guess what I'm recalling is a Railjack Revisited update. So I've been asking the community team to compile all the feedback that we've gotten for Railjack. Been watching community videos, and basically doing a wholesale tuning / balance / fun pass to Railjack.
And without obviously, this is not obviously a place for you to like commit to any changes or anything, but is there like a general philosophy that you're like approaching that with in terms of how it should feel to pilot the Railjack, in terms of like if it should feel powerful or if it should be this slow, kind of more methodical thing where it sort of is sitting now?
I think we need to get it more into the line of what the Warframe combat is, which is that, many versus one or many versus few. Right now, the Railjack feels like it's drowning all the time. You're constantly patching holes. You're constantly at 0 health. You're constantly in a state of on fire. So getting away from that and making it more, for lack of a better term, I would say arcadey. So dropping the TTK on the enemies, making the movement of the Railjack maybe a little bit quicker, more responsive.
What about resources to craft all of the parts? Because I know that's a massive stumbling block for a lot of people.
We're looking at the balance of the economy. I just got a message almost right now. In the last hour, I've gotten a message from one of our programmers, the valence transfer for Railjack parts and weapons is done. So we're basically applying the same idea that we did for the Lich weapons So you can take your MK1 gear and upgrade it and use it, and that investment will carry forward. When you find your next piece of gear, you can then valence transfer your MK1 gear onto your brand new MK2 gear and boost up the stats and continue forward.
Awesome.
Like
That
Shay
sounds
says,
great.
what about is making abilities useful on high level enemies? Is that on the list? Do you build scaling them up?
Like I said, I'm kind of trying to do a wholesale audit of all the systems. Again, Railjack is like almost like a brand new game. There's a lot of interconnected systems that are all out of balance.
Yeah.
So looking at the base first and doing a pass on all of the, like I said, the TTK, the feel of the weapons, the overheat times, the intrinsic farming, looking at the speed and feel of the Railjack, how many enemies we're spawning, where are we spawning them, how are we spawning them, how far away.
Mission types?
Mission types are
because
not
right now
on the
it's
list.
just kind of exterminate. It's like exterminate.
Well, from my point of view, I feel like that stuff just comes with time once everyone's happy with kind of the core gameplay. Am I correct in assuming that?
I don't want to build on a foundation that is not solid. I think the concept of Railjack and I think the goals for Railjack, which is basically is still the goals, is still to connect the game and add more connectiveness to the game. Is that fully realized yet? No. Will that come with time? Yes. So I want to make sure that we feel that the core combat loop for Railjack is solid enough. Is it fun to kill fighters? Is it fun to engage against a cruise ship? Is it fun to complete even the exterminate is what we call our simplest mission.
Right.
If we can make exterminate fun and engaging, then when we make other more interesting, more complicated game modes, then we should be able to. Those should be fun as well.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a bad idea. It's a really, really good idea, and you can see that it has potential to be something like really awe-inspiring. It's just not quite there. Which actually
honestly feels like the early days of Warframe. When Warframe initially shipped, to be honest, it was kind of in the same mess. People need to give Railjack that time to grow, or at least I hope they give that time to grow. And I hope when we release updates to it and balance changes to it, people will take the time to revisit it. The co-opness of the base design of Railjack is really solid, and I think, like you guys have said, the tuning of it is just not right. It's not in the right spot. It's not the right mind frame for what Warframe is. Right. So I think just retuning it and redialing all the numbers back to a point where it kind of feels like that your Railjack is the Space Ninja of ship combat would be, I think, the goal, right? So you can go into a mob of, 10 or 15 fighters, and you're going to come out the other side feeling like, yeah, I'm a badass. I just wiped them all off planet, because you're not on a planet, off the, surface
of the galaxy,
removed from the universe,
or removed from space dust, and you come out the other side without like 15 holes that you got to patch and crafting things you need to do. One of the early things I've done with this is we've limited the number of the breaches that can happen in the ship down to 1. We've limited the number of fires down to 1. Number of electricity hazards that can happen down to 1. But they happen a lot less frequently. But the caveat is when they do happen, they're a bigger event. So instead of 1,000 cuts, when these things happen, you're like, oh shit, I really need to deal with that. And it's a moment where the gameplay can switch.
And with this kind of whole Railjack revisited type thing, is there going to be a sort of similar thing happening with the Arcwings and how those are going to be approached in space? Because originally they were, I think, pretty widely considered to be better than the Railjack at fighting in space, and then they were adjusted down. Do you think there's going to be a large adjustment back up so that the Arcwings are also going to be capable of doing stuff in space? So the players that have invested in those are going to be able to use their new, obviously they're going to be modular soon, Arcwings to accomplish content with the Railjack, like one player mainly piloting the Railjack, other players able to use their Arcwings to great effect? Or do you think that it's going to stay where Arcwings are kind of just going to be transportation onto enemy ships and things and not be used so much for combat as it stands now?
See, part of the problem when we first released Railjack, at least my fear when we first released Railjack was the Arcwing was going to completely overshadow anything the Railjack could do.
Mm-hmm.
So we added stuff to the game, probably overtuned. It is overtuned. That nerfs their damage. So we've already halved that. So the damage reduction of your Warframe or of your Arcwing weapons and the damage bonuses that you take from enemies have all been cut in half already as
Okay.
part of pass. Joe, who does all of our weapon designs as of late, he did the self-damage update stuff. He worked on that. He's been working on all the Arcwings.
Mhm.
So he's been converting those into the modular system and revisiting all of the powers and all of the weapons and doing a balance pass on them, fixing melee. So that's going to come out in kind of stages. He's added a lead indicator on the targeting for the weapons so that you can actually use them and understand where you need to shoot. So you land shots like you do with the Railjack.
Yeah.
So that's coming in. Fixed up melee system is coming in as well, so that melee actually works because broken.
Yeah, well, because right now it's just such short range for such a large area, right?
Yeah. So tuning it all to kind of fit the Railjack content is the goal, and it's probably going to come in bits and parts. Some of it will come with the initial Railjack revisited launch, and then bigger amount of changes will come with the modular stuff. We're still trying to figure out when the modular stuff will come out, but it will be coming out after the Railjack revisited stuff.
Okay.
So the lead indicator and the melee fixes are the first thing for Arcwing, and then the overall balance change for Arcwing and Railjack to make them more viable is coming as well. The power audit and that will be coming later with the modular Arcwing.
Is there like a consideration for where the amount of intrinsics grind there is currently as compared to like your gains as compared with like the breadth of content that is currently available in Railjack? Is there a consideration to change any balance on that where those extremely escalating costs are maybe like going to be adjusted in some way?
Sorry, I was getting a bit dry from talking too much.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I've got my water here as well.
I got a beer now. I'm good. The intrinsic grind, the first thing I did was basically we convert XP into intrinsics at a conversion rate. So I've doubled that number as a starting point.
Okay.
So obviously that will speed it up, but it also speeds up all of the exploits that are used to farm intrinsics, which you've made very nice videos demonstrating. So the next thing I'm doing is doing a XP pass on all of the things that give you XP in Railjack. So looking at the XP values of killing a fighter, killing an elite fighter, killing a cruise ship, putting out a fire, putting out electricity, all those things that give you XP from Railjack activities, and kind of boosting those up as well to kind of make them more juicy.
So we've kind of discussed like some of the issues that Railjack has, and that it's going to get a revisit. Does it put any hesitation on like implementing Railjack as, say, like in Scarlet Spear? Was there any hesitation in being like, okay, we're going to do a Railjack mode, but it's really fragile and it's not done yet? And should we be making Railjack content now, or should we wait until the revisit is done with it when it's much more solid and once it's much more in place?
I think the initial intent was for the schedule to be kind of shuffled around from what you guys are currently seeing in the public. But the way development happens and life happens and shit happens, content slips and content gets moved, so things end up getting moved forward and moved backwards based on the progress of each of the things. So initially the kind of revisit or a rebalance or a relook in the modular Arcwings and stuff were supposed to come before Scarlet Spear. So the revisit thing is probably should have been done first, and I kind of agree with that. But just the way it worked out, and it's it was always supposed to be tied with the Corpus expansion.
Is that kind of also what maybe happened with Nightwave and why there's been such an extended intermission, because there's just so much going on and schedules get changed, and maybe you wanted to do Nightwave a little bit sooner, but
we definitely want to do Nightwave sooner. Some of the development of Nightwave didn't go as smoothly or as quickly as we'd like.
But before we super get started talking about Nightwave, just like I kind of want to ask a general question about maybe how you guys view Nightwave. It seems like with the first iteration, it was kind of like obviously the big launch. Nightwave is this new mode. You had like the Saturn 6 stuff, and it was like this kind of more large event. And then it seemed to, with the second series, kind of get bigger. Do you think there's maybe an over-ambition problem with Nightwave, where this third series is maybe bigger than Nightwave needs to be, as what I view Nightwave to be is kind of content that keeps players coming back in a terms of a nice reward track to have that has some intermissions to allow older or newer players rather to catch up and get those rewards later? Do you think it's kind of outgrown maybe its initial intent in terms of the ambition of it?
I don't know if the ambition has grown bigger than it is required. I don't think the ambition for Series 3 has grown so large that everyone's going to get it and go, oh crap, you guys can't sustain this. Like I said, the kind of just some of the development difficulties of it, and staffing issues and people being pulled onto different things have led to where we are on it. Ideally, we'd get back on track and be releasing them on a better schedule. And I know internally there's lots and lots of will to get back onto that. Like, let's just release them on the proper schedule so that people don't end up with intermissions that go for months. Yeah.
And just so Shy's the voice gets in here, she said, in my opinion, Nightwave could be the main content delivery platform for Warframe. You can release so much stuff in it, and it doesn't need to be super big. It can be a Series 1 size, couple cutscenes, some armor, weapons, and mods, and people will love it.
I agree, personally.
Yeah, it could be as small as that, but I think people also like kind of the bigger lore of the next ones.
In terms of doing the Nightwave
Tater,
on a bigger
you're here.
scale. Sorry, my dog was barking at the gate or the door right beside me, so I had to bloody go out and shoo him away.
In your shed.
Yeah, literally right beside the door, barking away. So in terms of having things on a larger scale, office and things of a larger scale, with the Nightwave, and the fact that what Brozime was saying earlier about maybe not overreaching, but I guess aiming a little bit too high. Do you think that maybe doing all of the big updates that's planned while also trying to do a big Nightwave is maybe putting that bit too much of a strain or pressure on you as developers in the studio trying to get all of this content out?
Yeah, I think it's just making sure we have a balance of people working on the different things. And making sure that when they are working on those things, that we can give it enough focus from the people that need to give it the focus to get it done on time. The way we like to develop things and the way we like to work as developers, we don't super want to pigeonhole certain groups of people to only work on certain content, because that basically leads to burnout. We have a development team and a live team, and the live team only gets to deal with bugs and deal with the being, shit on by the community for certain things, and they just have to continually fix problems versus creating new content. And those people get burnt out.
That's fair.
Developers that develop content and never have to deal with the front line get complacent, and they don't develop content in a quick enough or a solid enough manner that they understand the reception of it. We generally have a rotation of people. Again, we're not a massive developer.
Right.
Our numbers on the wiki and all that stuff, there's a lot of support staff that go along with that. Developer-wise, we're not as big as people really think we are. So dedicating people to very specific tasks generally doesn't work.
On the topic of the last time me and you spoke on Frozen's thing, you mentioned about the possibility of adding a slider, and it was something that was mentioned on the previous dev stream as well. And then I think on 2 weeks ago, when Rebecca and Steve had the kind of dev stream from home, Steve had mentioned how he had spoken to you, or you had mentioned it to him about the possibility of adding in that difficulty slider and adding the higher level enemies, so as you could jump into a mission that would straight away be a certain level. Have you pushed that forward anymore, or given it any more thought? Or
we've kicked around this idea probably for 5 years to have, like, when you've completed the star chart, you now have the ability to unlock the difficulty selection of the nodes. Personally, I'd like to see us do it because I don't think it's going to be that hard to do. Again, it's what are the rewards? How does that work? Is it exploitable? That sort of thing.
Right.
Like Shai says, other games do. Division 2 does it really well, where basically when you're finished the main storyline, you can then choose 3 different difficulties, and rewards will kind of scale differently depending on which difficulty you have it on. You know, so it could work really well. But I may as well ask the other one that Shai's on about. How about that universal vacuum?
Oh, okay. Hold on. Before we get into this, credit where memes. Credit where credit is due. Scott is literally the person who implemented a larger pickup range universally already.
And he snuck it in as well. He snuck it in with him knowing.
It's on there. It's just small.
Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously Shai wants the big suck though.
She wants the big.
She wants the big suck. Double C, no K.
Well, I mean, it is like kind of a real question though. Is there a consideration to add something like that? Because as it stands now, obviously fetch was added to much glee from my community personally, and then obviously we have vacuum working on all of the sentinels, so all of our companions give us access to that type of effect. And from my point of view personally, anytime I ask like really any group of Warframe players, whether that has made them much more likely to use Kubros and Kavats, it's a pretty much universal yes. So do you think there's the merit?
Vacuum in so that no one uses Kavats and Kubros anymore.
No, it's not that. It's basically if you had it in, it would remove the need to have to use a certain one. As in, if you don't have universal vacuum, you have to use Carrier with vacuum, or a Sentinel with a vacuum, or you have to use a Kubro. Whereas if that was in, you could use whatever you wanted.
And the thing that I see a lot of players do even still is if their Sentinel dies, they let the enemies kill them so that they can revive and their Sentinel can come back, just because vacuum is that kind of quality of life add-on where if they don't have it, they're just having considerably less fun in the mission. Well, and I just think it's...
Honestly, the conversation about universal vacuum, I haven't actually personally heard in probably 6 months or more. So it hasn't been on my mind at all.
Have you got a board at home? Days since someone mentioned universal vacuum, and it was up to like day 40. Back then to one.
Scratching day 40 out.
Yeah, and I would say largely in general, like I mean, there I know that there is a subset of players that maybe don't want vacuum, and like that's totally fine. So if it were to be made universal, I think to appease those players, it would be a thing that you could turn off. I think that would be fair.
Like an augment.
Yeah, like an augment. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. Like it's nice to have. You ever played Gungeon DK? When you clear a room in that game, every piece of loot flies at you, and you ain't gotta walk around like an asshole collecting crap. It feels so nice.
What do you guys think of Shai's Exilus slot mod?
Oh, I don't know about that one.
I already imagine the uproar.
I'm very much not a fan of that.
You want to be able to turn it off.
Well, let me be clear.
Is over the next 300 hot fixes, I'm going to increase the current universal vacuum by 1%.
If anyone notices.
I'll tell you what. Just to move on from this topic, I'll put it on my list of things to kind of have a look at. I can't say I'm against it. So let's leave it at that. I'll have a review of it, and if it doesn't come out again, then you know what. They can make more YouTube videos about how I'm an awful person.
No.
Shai's giving me the angry Rebecca eyes, so I was like, yeah, it's time to move on.
just even considering it, I think is totally valid. And I obviously think like
it hasn't come up in quite a while, so
right. And like the change to add fetch and stuff alleviated like a lot of the community's feeling in a large way, I think.
Right.
To dive into something that's a little bit older and hopefully maybe not too much of a Band-Aid that is also a system. Scott, what are your current thoughts on where focus is at?
Oh, focus. Oh, or lonely, abandoned focus. I really want to get back to it, honestly. I do like the system. I do like how it kind of added a layer of maybe the grind was too long on top. Maybe it needs the same sort of intrinsic doubling that I've done. Personally, I'd like to add another kind of branch to all the trees, with some new thoughts and new stuff on operator stuff. You know, the operator kind of feels abandoned right now and hasn't had any love in quite a while. Personally, I'd like to get back to it. It's just finding time to do it. I think we need to add more of the permanent ones. What was the name that we came up with that?
Oh, the waybounds.
The waybounds, yes. We need to add more of those, I think. You know, that would be an easy, almost first pass would be to like figure out
which ones can be waybounded.
Which ones are the most like, hey, can we get this to be converted to waybound and get that done? That probably wouldn't take too long to get done.
With that, is there any kind of consideration for maybe trimming the fat on abilities that like just aren't that good and like maybe just do very little for the overall system of focus in general? And maybe that helps bring the grind down in a way that's like, well, this ability isn't one that people really care about.
I don't think I'd want to trim. I think I'd want to buff and balance and bring those things up to something that it was a choice that you would want to make. Can we make it better? Can we make it more useful? Can we make it more modern to the Warframe combat that exists right now?
And it has like a large, I think, knock-on effect with just focus grinding being difficult enough that there are specific, like essentially loot caves for it, like ESO, and that's kind of affecting the overall way I would say that Warframe's current meta has developed, what with the high usage of Warframes like Saren and stuff like that. Yep. So adjusting those things might change a lot of play times of certain Warframes at the higher end.
Yeah. What would you guys think of even just, simply just doubling the conversion rate?
I mean, like, I think that would be a positive step. I think to go with the conversion rate specifically, though, I think lenses are maybe kind of a flawed system where if the lens system was better, I think people would be happier. Obviously, a number bump is great, but the current progression system of like you get focus for the first time and you choose your school and you have your base level lens, right?
Right.
You're not able to put that in something and then upgrade it. You're in this situation where if you want a better lens in objects, you need to like break that lens and then go get more of that same lens to put into the different upgraded versions of lenses. And it just seems kind of disconnected where you can't take out a low level lens, upgrade it into the new one and slap that in, and suddenly you're getting so much more focus. It doesn't really seem like much of a reward system, and it seems to punish you for putting a lens in things too soon. If we were able to do like a nice progression loop where we're getting up to that Lua lens in a more clean way, I think that would do wonders, honestly, for just people farming focus in general and how enjoyable that is, and if people feel like they're being rewarded.
I'll add that to my list, and I don't know when I'll get to that, but I'll have a look.
Well, obviously, yeah,
tons to be a long list.
Tons to do.
Very long list.
Scott, would you say overall you're kind of happy? Well, happy or not, I suppose, with the way the operators are being used, like generally pretty happy with how it's kind of just always like the great abilities, I think, coming out of focus are enhancing the Warframe and not so much making the operator the focus of the gameplay.
I like that the operators are utility on top of the Warframe. The Warframe is the combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And should be the focus. So I like that they augment the Warframe more.
With following exactly onto that point, do you think there is room to change the balance of like where amps are, or maybe what abilities can affect operators to make Eidolon hunting more of less of a shield phase during Eidolon's kind of a lot of the reason I hear all the time from people is that the reason they don't do Eidolons is one, that it's just not accessible in terms of like the times a lot of people have to play, but also that shield phase is just so long. And if it were like I get out of my operator and like my Adarza Kavat is buffing me, which used to be a thing that worked, and then also I've got a Rhino buff on and we're tearing these shields apart and we're using this Warframe plus operator like stuff in conjunction to like really like pelt down these eidolons, I think it could be a much better experience than it currently is. But right now it's very fire the pea shooter at the large man for an extended period of time, unless you're doing like very specific matter eye
You want to
interactions.
get the amps boosted up.
Yeah.
In the future, that's probably a possibility.
Okay.
It's just this extended time of shooting this little pea shooter at this guy, and it's just like, unless I'm doing the meta shit, this is gonna take all night. I'm gonna get maybe one eidolon out of it, and I'm probably not even gonna get the arcane I want. And it's just, and then you've got this whole crazy system with the amps where it's like everybody's like, oh, do you use the 382? And I'm like, what the fuck is a 382? And it's just
But then on the flip side, you have to look at the fact that some squads can get out 20 in one night cycle with the current setup.
That's true.
How much is the consideration? So like what Tater just described to being like the 6x3, where you're doing the full 3 stack 6 times in one night, that being kind of like the most optimized party you could really possibly achieve. How much does something like that existing affect the balance that you guys try and apply to it?
The Warframe Revisited update we did, Steve's the biggest analogy for us doing that was like, he always, I'm not a music guy, so I'm gonna believe him when he says this, but he's like, we're putting a compressor on the game. We're getting rid of the highs and the lows and kind of trying to normalize what is on the output. We don't want to take away the power fans. We don't want to take away your ability to do 1 million damage. We want to take away the ability for you to do 10 million.
Okay.
Right.
So those extremely high end meta builds, those usually suffer when we do those type of updates. Not saying that we target those things, but we do have those conversations where it's like, hey, if we get rid of that meta build, well, this content is now more enjoyable because you're not forced into that meta build. I think that's more of the goal. We kind of want to target that mid-range. You have good gear, you have good strategy, but you're not pegged into one particular build or particular group in order to do this in the most optimal way.
With that, obviously, this kind of ties into some of the defense changes that we're going to be seeing, which obviously none of those numbers are final. But there seems to be a large normalization of like Trinity is going to be giving 50% DR to these defense objectives. That's what it says on there. Obviously not final. None of the numbers are final. But in like you're kind of giving it like Gara is 50% DR and normalizing across all of these defensive properties. Do you think we are going to see a lot of Warframes that can't do anything to the special content like Eidolons and like Liches and things like that, like such as Banshee's sonar ability? Do you think we're going to see an implementation where those damaging types of abilities that just don't apply and kind of pigeonhole us a little bit into using things like Rhino's buff and Chroma's buff on ourselves because we can't affect those large enemies? Do you think there's going to be a sort of workshop in that way to allow those abilities to regain a lot of their relevance that they've had in the past?
I think actually internally there's a push to make like we did with the Liches, or is in progress with the Liches, making the procs work.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was an incredibly positive change to make it so the status worked on them.
Yep.
The next step is to make sure that the Warframe stuff does things to those enemies.
Right.
And I believe there's actually a small team of people working on that internally to make sure that when you cast a power on an Eidolon, something happens.
Okay.
The fact that nothing happens is kind of lame. And probably at the time was done because it's 42 Warframes plus now times 4 powers. How do you make sure that all those do something and all those do something interesting?
Yeah.
So, and then like creating kind of a set of rules basically, which seems to be what like the defense thing suggests, where it's like, okay, healing is capped at this much, like this is the amount of DR that we kind of want to see on these things, like going through and making those decisions for the future, and then kind of backtracking through the current catalog to make everything function.
That's kind of would be the goal, yes.
Okay. So that's very good to hear personally.
And how long that's going to get done is completely unknown. But that would be the ideal, is we are going back through some of that old content instead of just making it completely immune, making something happen. So that goes with proc effects or status effects and Warframe power.
if you were looking at it like a meta idol group, it's like, well, one of the members of this party is Chroma or Rhino. You'd want it to be like, okay, no, Banshee can also do this, or like this frame can also do this, like having a lot more options in certain kind of slots in the team.
That would be the ideal.
Right.
That if I had to do again and could, rewind time and make it chip with like that, I probably would have. Sometimes you make decisions, someone will come into your office and say, hey, what about this? What do you want to do about it? You make a decision about it thinking, okay, that was easy. And then you go, oh shit, what did I do?
And then you get the very painful 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in the painful 2020, stuck at home.
Yeah.
No. Ugh. I guess one of the main other things I wanted to touch on, and I'm not sure how much involvement you specifically would have in this, but at least some amount, would be kind of the new player experience that was talked about at the last TennoCon. Obviously, we had the large, really cool cutscene that is at some point going to be integrated into the game. Where do you see the big improvement points that Warframe maybe needs along its progression path, especially early on?
We've done iterations on the new player experience over the years. And it hasn't really affected the adoption rate of the game, which is a very interesting thing, and is something that we've heard anecdotally across many free-to-play games, that your adoption rate is your adoption. People bounce off it or they don't. They either get it or they don't. Their computer either can run it or they can't. As far as what the new player experience, still probably the mod screen, probably the most like people open that up and go, whoa, I'm not smart enough to play this game, and then close it and walk away.
So do you think it would be of benefit to have for modding and like the mod menu and stuff, a slightly more guided experience to help people get used to that?
The fact that we have Bank kind of built into the game now allows us to kind of do video footage, which would allow us to kind of outside the game, allow like almost on a meta level, a talking head to come out and kind of tell you how the system works.
Right.
There's a possibility of that. I think that screen needs to be explained either in subsections or in bits and pieces or progressive disclosure, some way to kind of not bash you in the face with it right off the bat. But I don't have any good solutions at the time. I know the new player experience is something that we definitely want to tackle to get that really beautiful trailer that's really amazing.
Oh yeah, it looks amazing.
It looks amazing.
Fantastic.
It is amazing. Why we still don't have it attached to the game is probably one of the crimes of 2019. Again, it's priorities of the development. And I know the art team and the level design layout team have built a very large portion of that intro in at least a rough form in the game to kind of, because obviously that video doesn't match up with what the current beginning is. So
there'd have to be like a whole new storyboarding for like what the beginning of the game really is.
Yeah, or even the fact that the environment doesn't match.
Right.
That's the kind of the biggest hurdle. Is getting it so that you're in that temple, you select your Warframe, and then you walk out, and then hey, that's the field that I saw on the CG trailer, or I went out the back of the temple now because the front is closed, and now it all makes sense. Like making sure that matches up and it flows correctly is something that needs to be done.
Right, and it's obviously a huge challenge because that's the beginning of the game. That's the initial impression.
Yep.
You'd have to change up Vor's prize a little bit too, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's that whole quest is.
Yeah, you'd have to change like almost the entire thing.
Yeah,
it's not a small undertaking, but we are looking at ways that we can, more on a budget, get that trailer into the game and have a better first impression on the entire game. So it's definitely in the top 5 things that we need to address soonish, I would say.
So I've been playing personally a lot of Monster World since they launched their new big expansion, and one of the things that that game does, I think, would apply very well to Warframe, which is from time to time it'll introduce a new feature, and it will just have a text box that pops up, and you can scroll through and read a lot of detail on the system, or you can button through it.
Yep.
And I think something akin to that would be really, really helpful in Warframe in general.
Yeah. Like I said, we have the ability to do the big videos now, or even bounce you out to kind of like a YouTube thing.
Right.
We've talked about different ideas of how to address that. And again, we were really shy about doing really hardcore tutorials early in development because the game was changing so rapidly.
Oh yeah. I mean, like
started
7 years ago, you were flipping the game on its head every week.
Now that a lot of the core systems have settled and those core introductory systems probably could use some sort of better tutorial.
How much consideration whenever you guys are introducing new content is there for a sort of breadcrumbing system? And what I mean by that is like just letting players who aren't there when the update launches know that certain things exist, because there was just a lack of knowledge within the community where like people just didn't know they were there. Like a great example I would say of this is whenever SkillUp did his review. In that review, raids were in the game, but because he didn't know about them, his review actually contains a request for raids, utilizing like the in-game inbox or hitting certain MR levels and stuff being like a gateway to certain types of content. Like say when you hit MR6, it tells you, hey, Railjack is now available to you. Like you can go build your own, and like just having these pop-ups just to alert players that like these swaths of content do exist in these places.
Well, some of that stuff exists when you hit those. Like a lot of the questing stuff is all works that way. When you hit those mastery rank locks or unlocks, then it will tell you new quest is available. As far as game features, like raids, yeah, probably it probably would have helped raids a lot if people knew they were there. There's a lot of stuff in the game that is just there, and you have to kind of discover it.
Because we've talked a lot about kind of like meta builds and like what Warframes are meta and all that stuff. In terms of acquiring the mods that are usually needed for players to get to those high levels of power, which usually involves the corrupted mod, or the corrupted mods rather, is there a consideration for making that portion of the game more obvious? Because currently there is the keys for the vaults that are in the derelicts are stuck in the Orokin lab that was previously for dark sectors. They were moved there some time ago for whatever reason, and they used to be in the market where they were a bit more visible. So now they're kind of sequestered off, and I feel like without a guide telling you that that's where they are, it's very unlikely that most players are going to encounter them, but they're kind of the thing that allows you to get to those high levels of power. And I personally would like to see them be maybe a little bit more in your face with like, hey, you should probably use these to get some crazy stuff.
I don't know. Does the mod collection actually tell you where those things are acquired?
The mod collection will tell you where they're acquired, but if you don't have one, it actually does not tell you what any actually do.
So unless you go to the wiki, you don't have any idea what.
Yeah, right. It'd be kind of nice if it was like the way the relics work in the codex. You go to the codex, and it's like you highlight a relic that you don't have, and it's like this relic has this, and this, and this is exactly where it drops. These are the nodes you go to. If you could implement something like that for the mods, where you click on the mod, and it's like, hey, here's the mod, here's what it does, here's where you get it.
Right.
That would be a big help to everybody.
Definitely for new players.
I could agree with that. It'd be where we spend our development bucks and our development focus. So that would, to me, that would probably fall in kind of when we do the next revisited type update for the base game. Again, I would like to do those revisited updates kind of more often than once every 7 years.
That revisited update was great, by the way.
The revisited update was fantastic.
That's not perfect, but I think it was things that needed to be done, and some housekeeping and some bones that needed to be broken. And honestly, that was probably one of the updates that we were most nervous about internally.
Yeah, I remember when Steve was on some dev stream. He was like, "Oh, here we go," and I'm really worried about how.
I have text messages from Steve saying we should back it all out.
Yeah, And so you could see how nervous Steve was about it. And in my head, I was like, why are you nervous? This was great. This is like one of the best things that have happened to Warframe in the last 3 or 4 updates.
But it's the equivalent of like lifting your house and taking your foundation out and putting a new one on.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes anybody nervous, or it should make you nervous.
Yeah. Railjack, for reasons I don't think have really been touched on any of the dev streams or anything, has a completely its own unique elementals and everything that have not really been explained and don't appear in a lot of the UI. Whenever you're coming to revisit Railjack, do you think you're going to just change that stuff out with like the elementals we know and love, or are those going to get kind of a touch up?
They probably require a touch up. Why we did that? The thought behind that was to kind of try to simplify crazy damage system we had and not have to apply it to all of the Railjack stuff. It definitely needs a revisit and definitely needs a rethink. Will that be a part of the actual revisit? I'm not 100% sure yet. It'll be whether or not I get time to kind of go over it, but it's definitely something that probably should be revisited and probably surface somewhere. When we make major changes like that, I kind of let it settle and kind of let everything kind of the waves the waves in the pool to settle down before I read the tea leaves again.
Right. So like once people are kind of out of the heat of the moment, they can be like, oh yeah, that thing's good, or oh yeah, that thing's not really a thing I use. That kind of response more so than the fire.
Yeah. The initial feedback generally within the first hour of an update is generally the most heated and like, you changed my shit. I don't like this.
Yeah. People are at 100% or 0%.
Yeah. So I like those things. I like to let them sit for a bit, but generally, hopefully I'll be able to get back to that soonish and have another look. There is a bunch of kind of damage Warframe revisited stuff that is on the back burner being done by programmers that I think we've talked about before, which is basically the way things are multiplied to create damage.
Right.
We're breaking some bones in that system in order to kind of unify it and make sure that we don't have scaling damage going off into Infinity Land. So I think when those things get completed and we've had a chance to test them, we'll try to bundle them up with another kind of revisited style update.
Right.
And that kind of changes some of the things. And hopefully in that, we'll be able to kind of have another look at the procs and status. And then the other thing we're kind of targeting to clean up is the status versus crit and how crit feeds into status. A crit build is always viable because a crit build will actually boost up your status, right? So we're kind of going to break those bones and separate those systems so that when you're choosing those weapons, there's actually a choice.
Right. And then that also kind of goes into where having statuses affect liches, and then maybe having statuses affect like eidolons and other
100%.
like high value targets.
You're addressing those situations, right? If DPS and crit is the king because 100% that's always going to work.
Objects are crit immune.
Wow.
I guess, but that's a box.
The real end game. Aficionado Brozime letting us know that crit doesn't work on the boxes.
Hey man,
break your fire.
Next boss is going to be just a stack of boxes that just
it's just a really large box with a health.
It just works like a slinky. It's just boxes that just roll over on each other, and you just can't crit it. You better melt it with toxin.
It's just the flipping boxes from Super Mario 64.
Exactly.
They're real mad.
Stacking boxes.
Oh man.
You keep getting smaller and smaller until you can't target them anymore.
Oh no. What's this
ball?
It's the Matryoshka.
The Matryoshka, yeah. I was kind of wondering. So there was just a community frame that was voted on, and I was wondering. So really, the only people that voted on that were like the design council, and I was wondering if there was ever sort of an idea to use that sort of news panel in our orbiter for something like that. Like when you have a design council frame that you want people to see the choices, was there ever an idea to use that as a way to direct people to these polls or to these voting sessions, or as a way to sort of get feedback?
I think you're more referring to like Steve's Twitter poll that he did.
Yeah, definitely.
Being, on a third-party site and everything else.
Heat of the moment.
heat of
Yeah.
the moment.
Where it's just
Exactly.
like Steve happens to be on Twitter at 1 a.m. and he's like, I want to do this.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
he has every right to do that.
Sure.
So that's how that probably came about versus,
Gotcha.
as a company, we sat down and went, hey, we really need to have a poll of the company or of our players. This was probably Steve in a moment of reflection, wanting to know how as people were feeling. And,
Yeah.
as all of you know, we are on Twitter. We do.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Except for Jeff, he just has his parody account.
He does just that.
Wait, you tell me that's not really Jeff?
That is Jeff, 100%.
How come it was just the guys that got the vote on it? Since it is going to be a frame that makes it into the game, how come it wasn't like a community-wide vote? I know the abilities are going to be community-wide.
I'm not sure exactly how all that's going. I pitched the idea to, or did Rebecca pitch that to me? Early in the year or late last year, we were kind of thinking about 2020 and Warframe development, the Warframes development. And one of us pitched the other, hey, we should let the community make one. And that would free me up because I generally spend a lot of time doing the Warframes. I said that would free me up to do other things. I said, why don't you let the community do it? And then wouldn't it be cool if, we brought the people that either help with it or something and had them come on site, have like some in-person meetings and kind of make it kind of a bigger thing, and involve the community more. I don't know if that was Reb's idea or my idea, but that was the idea we kind of settled on. So the actual structure of it, I can't really comment on, and who gets to vote on what and who does what and who's doing what. I just kind of see the end results now.
The main reason I wanted to bring it up is because, like, once that broken frame was decided on, and obviously I have no idea where it's going to go, what its powers are going to be. So it's a blank slate at this point that you can't really judge. But by and large, whenever I talk about it on Twitch or on YouTube, universally the community doesn't seem to think it's a great idea. And so that's why it's just like, if you could get a bigger scope from the community, because like I said, I really haven't seen too many people that have this positive outlook on it. Granted, it's way too early to judge it, but just right out the gate, most people just like broken frame that's just buggy. And I don't know, man, that doesn't seem like a great idea. So it's like when the community is by and large like so negative about it, I'm just like, maybe
think it's because
the
design council are the ones that got the vote on it. And I know on the video where I spoke about the broken frame, I got a fair few comments from guys saying I'm in the design council. I haven't played Warframe in a few months, but fuck it, I voted for broken frame because fucking why not? Basically, they didn't take the vote serious or anything like that. They literally just wanted to go meme frame. Right. Let's vote meme frame.
Just because it's been so long since people have gained access to the design council.
But I think most people are automatically thinking of a Warframe where his arms are on the wrong way around or his legs are upside down. Kind of, they're literally thinking broken aspect and not like broken internally or mentally or whatever else. So
they're thinking like the ultimate is like a T-pose ult or something.
Basically,
meme frame.
Just exactly. Memeing.
So we'll make it the most overpowered, coolest thing you've ever seen, and then
there we go.
Give it a massive exalted nerf hammer. It squeaks.
Exalted nerf. Yeah. You literally can nerf other players.
You hit other Warframes, and now their powers do less.
They're just broken.
Shai said, "Give it super jump." I don't know about that, Shai. Your memes are going a little too hard now, dude. Well, that's true.
Super jump still exists in the game.
Really? Is it still floating around in there?
It's the default power we use for the development of Warframes.
Oh, so that's wonderful.
When a Warframe gets first roughed in, it gets basically 4 copies of Super Jump.
Before you get real powers, you must jump.
How much is like community outcry like affect like the speed of development? Because like anytime someone posts like a criticism on, say, like the last 3 updates, one of the comments you are guaranteed to see is, well, it's kind of the content creators' fault because they kept shouting about this content drought. There's not enough content. Now content's coming out and you're seeing that it's, it's maybe a little unfinished. It's a little buggy, but that's your fault because you pushed them into trying to do too much too soon and all that stuff. How much does that actually affect? Or is there just a schedule and it's like, nope, we're doing it this way. It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess not necessarily. It doesn't matter what everyone's saying, but
when there's a big community outcry about the lack of content, I think we feel that before the community feels that.
Gotcha.
So I think the we feel that pressure internally before it surfaces externally. I think part of development is iteration, right? It's cycles.
Right.
It's try some shit, and if it doesn't work, you're like, oh shit, and if it does work, you're like, oh, this is rad, and you're able to finish it and polish it up and get it out the door. But if it isn't working and it's the next thing that's supposed to be on the list, you go, oh shit.
Yeah, because like if you're in December, you're like, oh, we want to do this thing, and we could probably get that out there in March, but then it's almost March, and you're like, there's no way this thing's happening in March.
Exactly, right? So then the last thing you dropped is February. The thing that was supposed to go in March isn't working or isn't fun or isn't complete or isn't something.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so what can we pull forward, or how can we change this system in order to make it ship when it was supposed to ship? And some of that happens, and some of it just changes the schedule, and some of that creates content drought. Basically, we go, you know what? There's nothing to ship right now because there's nothing good to ship. Or it's, hey, let's whip up a tactical alert, or like let's see what's in our pile of weapons and stuff that we can release that gives players something to chase or something to do for a while, something to try out, a new weapon to level up, and we work on it that way.
Do you think there was maybe a point earlier than it's been in this intermission where it should have maybe been considered to rerun the first Nightwave event?
I'm not even sure if we ever really considered rerunning a Nightwave season yet. I don't think the system is quite old enough to warrant that yet.
Okay.
Maybe the really long intermission should have. But I kind of feel like that would have pissed off more people than just the intermission. Hey guys, it's been an intermission. And oh, by the way, just rerun the first one again.
Yeah, I could see that causing some,
Yeah, it's a catch-22. Like, you want to change things up and give people something new to do or something new to try, or new players, hey, you never saw this. Here's your opportunity to see it.
Yeah.
Right.
But then the elder players who make, the YouTube content, not necessarily you guys, but there would be a subset of players that would be angry that we did that. The drama YouTube video, or it really, really makes it hard for myself and others on the team to want to engage in that content and actually look at it. I know it's maybe speaking truth to power is the thing, but man, it's tough to listen to. I'm just some dude making a video game who has, a wife and a family and has to go home at night to be happy about that. But I watch some of these videos and it's just like, man, I'm not a criminal. I'm not here to make your life miserable. I'm trying to make something you enjoy. Brozime, to be honest with you, some of your videos come off really harsh and they're really hard to watch. Are they wrong? I don't think they're necessarily wrong, but goddamn, the tone of them sometimes, I just open them up. I listen to the first 10 minutes or 5 minutes and I'm just like, I can't listen to this. Mentally, for my well-being, I just can't listen to this.
That's
so
fair.
we sometimes we punt those to community managers and community people to kind of do a summary on, so that we do get the feedback. But goddamn, they're hard to listen to sometimes.
Yeah.
So I try to, and those days where I'm in the mood to, I try to plow through them. The last couple of days, because I have been working on the Railjack Revisited, I've been trying to get through as much Railjack feedback YouTube videos, and rightfully so. They are negative. They have a negative slant, but goddamn, they're soul crushing for the effort that was put into it and the result that it is, and the ambition that's there. And then you watch that and you go, goddamn. But we want to make it better. We want to improve the game. We're not here to tank it. We're not here to fleece you guys for more money.
Right.
We are trying to make a fun game that is fair to play, and we want to take the feedback where we can get it.
Some of the feedback, it was, I guess, warranted. I guess the negativity.
Oh, for sure. And I'm not saying it's not warranted. I'm not saying that it's unjust, and I'm not saying that it's not something that we need to hear. It's just hard to engage with as the receiver of that feedback.
Oh yeah,
That's
that's
fair.
completely
Right?
understandable.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, obviously you're gonna kick yourself harder than anybody because obviously you know what went out, you know what needs fixing, and then just to hear it just like just a dump truck getting smashed into you, it's undeniably got to be real rough to deal with. But you
I'm
still
not looking
listen
for
to
a
it, and you
what was
still
like what was me. I'm
oh
not
no,
Oh.
sure,
Right.
but
Well, like because from
I mean-
from my side of things, obviously, just with like the way my channel is, I do in the videos usually play up a little bit just because that is a little bit of the thing that people want to see, is that whenever I'm unhappy with a thing, that it's like it's a big deal. But it's also on the back end of that, like the reasons that I usually dig so hard into a lot of this stuff, it really does always come from a place of like, I think Warframe deserves to be and like should be like the best free to play game like that is around. Like it should be the daily driver game for people. And like there's so many releases that have come out that like just like cement that like that's absolutely possible, and that like obviously the whole team at DE is very capable of making like this extremely stellar content. Like we've had plenty of updates that are just like, this update's basically flawless. And more recently, it's been more on the negative slant, obviously. But I hope that it's not too hard to listen to, obviously, because I do it out of like just really caring about the game at large, and obviously, you do the same, because like the reason it's hard to listen to is because you care.
Yeah, 100%. Like I get where you guys are coming from, and I get, like I said, the negative feedback is sometimes it's warranted, and I get that as a YouTube content creator, that having a personality and a style drives the way your channel works, and I get that.
The virus and that, like I'd imagine that certain things will be pushed back because of not being able to get into the studio, or because like TennoCon is now going to be digital only and things like that.
Yeah, we've definitely had to
rebalance.
Yeah, we're definitely had to rebalance our focus and trying to juggle maybe less things at once. Being remote means you got to focus on the things that are most imminent to ship. We are definitely shuffling the schedule and looking at priorities and making sure that this is the type of content that we can deliver in the situation that we're in.
How much more difficult is it to actually like do the day-to-day stuff when you are, you know, self-isolating, you're staying home? I mean, you have access to the studio, sure, but everybody's sort of doing everything remotely. Like, how much more of a strain does that put on a company?
Yeah. And in-person interactions, I think is huge, and it solves problems quicker. That's a big thing we're missing. Steve and I, obviously, you guys know we share an office, so we communicate back and forth very regularly when we're in the office. That is obviously not happening. We are trying to utilize video chat and stuff to help with that stuff. Sheldon was saying that the HR studies on remote work is basically there's about a 20% drop in productivity in general as a rule. People at home, you know, that live in small apartments that are on their kitchen table with their machine with kids running around and their spouse home, and it's not really the same setup as you would have like a normal work from home situation where you have a quiet office. It's something you do every day. You know, your spouse has gone to work and your kids are gone to school, so you can focus. We're definitely in times that are uncharted water. I'm lucky myself. I have a separate space that is away from the house so that I can focus. But I still find that I have times where, you know, my wife gets frustrated and you know, we have, you know, I have one of my kids show up in my office because they're in trouble. Yeah, like I said,
because I know you're in a shed. Is there a Canadian Shed Association?
I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
There's fucking one in Ireland. It bloody showed up on my Facebook the other day. Join the Irish Shed Association, and it just shows a load of old men sitting in front of their sheds.
Tater, if you're trapped in a shed, you can tell us.
I thought you were literally going to say it's kind of like the HOA where I have to pay X, Y, and Z for things around the shed. Shy asked, "What's next for Warframe?"
Oh yeah, that's good. That's a nice general question. What's next for Warframe, but also Scott?
Next for me? What do you mean?
Yeah, just in general, like what you're
Well, he wants to know
Kind
what's
of
for
focusing
dinner.
on
Like,
overall.
what's
Oh yeah,
what's
obviously
falling
what's for dinner is
I
very
mean,
important.
Oh, it's probably like hot dogs and craft dinner.
Hell yeah.
Nightwave is the next big thing. I'm not really sure of the release time yet. And for me, the next thing I'm working on is what I'm still working on is the Railjack Revisited stuff.
Scott, thank you very much for joining all of us. If everyone would like to say what's up, what's going on, DK, Tater, if you guys would like to start.
I'm DK. I do Twitch and YouTube stuff. I use the same name everywhere. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Hey,
Yeah, thanks, Scott,
been
for being
fun.
here.
Maybe we can do this more often.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That
been
would
very
be
fun. It's
great,
been very eye-opening
actually.
for just kind of how things kind of just are and like what's being worked on and stuff. And it's interesting to hear the process.
Yeah.
We'll make sure Tater's awake next time.
Yeah, wait, make sure my dog stops bloody
He was
barking. It's like
kicking the dog out of the shed.
Yeah.
bloody-